My roommate tries to destroy my life. When Emily first came to see the apartment, I thought I had finally found the perfect roommate. She was polite, soft-spoken, and carried herself with a kind of warmth that made me feel comfortable right away. She complimented the way I had decorated the living room, laughed at my small jokes, and even offered to help with groceries before she had even moved in. After weeks of searching and meeting people who felt wrong in one way or another, Emily seemed like a blessing. I told myself this was the start of something good, maybe even a friendship I could rely on. The first week was smooth, almost too smooth. Emily cooked dinner twice, cleaned the kitchen without being asked, and even fixed a squeaky door that had annoyed me for months. She seemed thoughtful and considerate, the kind of person who made life easier instead of harder. I remember thinking how rare it was to find someone who actually cared about the space they lived in. But even then, there were little things that didn't quite fit. She asked a lot of questions, and sometimes her answers to mine didn't match up. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. It started with small lies. Emily told me she didn't drink coffee, but one night I found her in the kitchen making a cup at midnight. Another time, she said she had grown up in a nearby town, but later she mentioned memories from a completely different city. When I asked about it, she laughed and said I must have misheard her. They were small contradictions, easy to ignore, but they left me unsettled. Why lie about things that didn't matter? Then came the questions. At first, they seemed harmless, asking about my job, my family, and my friends. But soon they became oddly personal. She wanted to know where my parents lived, what time I usually left for work, and even the names of people I hadn't spoken to in years. When I asked why she was so curious, she smiled and said she just liked to know the people she lived with. I laughed it off, but deep down I felt uneasy. It was as if she was collecting pieces of me, one question at a time. Despite the unease, I told myself not to be paranoid. Emily was helpful, polite, and always eager to make life easier. She offered to do the dishes, vacuumed the living room, and even bought groceries when I was busy. It was hard to complain about someone who seemed so considerate. But the more perfect she acted, the more I felt something wasn't right. It was like she was performing, as if every action was carefully chosen to make me trust her. One evening, I came home to find Emily sitting on the couch, flipping through one of my old photo albums. She smiled when I walked in and said she was just curious about my childhood. I laughed nervously, but inside I felt a chill. That album had been tucked away in a drawer, not left out for anyone to see. How had she even found it? I told myself it was harmless, but the thought lingered. She was digging into parts of my life I hadn't invited her into. The more I paid attention, the more I noticed how often Emily seemed to be in places she didn't belong. She lingered near my bedroom door when I was on the phone, pretended to be asleep when I walked past her room late at night, and always seemed to know things I hadn't told her. Once, she mentioned a conversation I had with a friend over text, even though I had never spoken about it out loud. I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted with unease. I tried to set boundaries, locking my bedroom door when I wasn't home and keeping personal items tucked away. But Emily always found a way to make me feel like I was overreacting. She'd joke about how paranoid I was, or act hurt that I didn't trust her. Her charm made it hard to confront her directly, and I kept second-guessing myself. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just being too cautious. That's what I told myself, even as the unease grew stronger every day. One night, after a long day at work, I came home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet, and I assumed Emily wasn't there. But as I walked down the hall toward my room, I noticed my door was slightly open. My heart skipped a beat. I always kept it closed, especially since I had started locking it. Slowly, I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, standing at my desk with her back to me, was Emily. My drawers were open, papers scattered across the surface, and her hands were rifling through my things. She didn't notice me at first, too focused on whatever she was searching for. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat, and in that moment, I realized the truth I had been avoiding. Emily wasn't just curious. She was intrusive, and she had crossed a line I could no longer ignore. I steadied my voice, stepped into the room, and said calmly, "Emily, what are you doing in my room?" The morning after I caught Emily in my room, things felt different between us. She acted as if nothing had happened, smiling brightly and asking if I wanted coffee. I tried to match her energy, but inside I was unsettled. When I asked why she had been in my room, she brushed it off with a laugh, saying she was just looking for a pen. Her tone was light, but her eyes didn't match her words. Something about the way she avoided my gaze made me realize she wasn't telling the truth. I wanted to believe her, to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting. But the image of her rifling through my desk wouldn't leave my mind. I replayed it over and over, wondering what she had been searching for. A pen? No one digs through drawers and papers for a pen. It was a weak excuse, and she knew it. Still, I let it slide in the moment, telling myself I'd keep my distance and watch more carefully. Over the next few days, Emily's behavior grew stranger. She was overly sweet, almost too attentive, as if she was trying to cover up what had happened. She cooked dinner every night, asked about my day in detail, and even offered to do my laundry. On the surface, it looked like kindness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all an act. It was as if she was trying to distract me, to make me forget what I had seen. Then came the first real betrayal. I had told Emily I was going to meet a friend for lunch, but when I arrived, my friend looked confused. She said she had already spoken to me earlier that morning, except I hadn't called her. Someone had used my phone number to send her a message, canceling our plans. My stomach dropped. I hadn't touched my phone all morning. The only person who had been near it was Emily. When I confronted her about it, Emily smiled innocently and said maybe my friend was mistaken. She even suggested that my friend might be lying. The way she twisted the situation made me doubt myself for a moment, but deep down, I knew the truth. Emily had gone through my phone. She had pretended to be me, and she had done it so smoothly that she thought I wouldn't notice. That night, I checked my phone carefully. Some of my messages had been opened, ones I hadn't read yet. A few photos were missing from my gallery, and I couldn't explain why. My hands shook as I scrolled, realizing Emily had been inside my private world, reading things that weren't meant for her. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was control. She wanted to know everything about me, even the things I hadn't chosen to share. I started locking my phone with a stronger password, keeping it close to me at all times. But Emily noticed. She laughed and teased me about being secretive, as if I was the one hiding something. Her words stung, but they also revealed something important. She didn't like being shut out. She wanted access, and when I denied it, she grew colder, sharper, less careful about hiding her intentions. The lies continued. She told me she had gone out to meet a friend, but I saw her car parked outside all evening. She claimed she didn't know my boss's name, but later she mentioned him casually in conversation. Every time I caught her in a contradiction, she had an excuse ready, a smile to soften the edges of her deception. But the more she lied, the more I saw through her. I realized then that Emily wasn't just curious. She was manipulative. She wanted to weave herself into every part of my life, to control how others saw me, and to make me doubt my own reality. The betrayal wasn't just in the lies she told, but in the way she tried to make me question myself. It was subtle, but it was dangerous. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't ignore the red flags anymore. Emily wasn't just a roommate with quirks. She was someone who had crossed boundaries and broken trust. From that moment on, I promised myself I would keep a closer eye on her. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let my guard down again. At first, I thought Emily's strange behavior was limited to my private space, but soon I realized she was reaching into my social life too. She started asking more questions about my friends, their names, where they lived, and how often I saw them. At first, I assumed she was just trying to get to know the people around me, but the way she asked felt different. It wasn't casual curiosity. It was calculated, as if she was gathering information for a reason I couldn't yet see. One evening, I invited my friend Sarah over for dinner. Emily was charming, polite, and even offered to cook. She laughed at Sarah's jokes, complimented her outfit, and acted like she was thrilled to meet her. But later that night, after Sarah left, Emily asked me strange questions about her. She wanted to know how long we had been friends, if Sarah had ever lied to me, and whether I trusted her completely. The questions unsettled me, but I brushed them off, telling myself Emily was just being protective. A few days later, Sarah called me sounding upset. She asked why I had told Emily about her personal problems, things she had only ever shared with me in confidence. I was shocked. I hadn't told Emily anything. But Sarah insisted Emily had mentioned details that only I could have known. My stomach dropped. Somehow, Emily had gotten into conversations or messages that weren't hers to see. I tried to explain to Sarah that I hadn't betrayed her, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. The situation grew worse when I noticed Emily spending more time on her phone, smiling to herself as she typed. I didn't think much of it until another friend, Daniel, messaged me asking why I had been talking behind his back. Confused, I asked what he meant, and he sent me screenshots of messages supposedly from me, saying cruel things about him. My heart raced as I read them. The words weren't mine, but the number was. Emily had somehow used my phone or found a way to impersonate me. When I confronted her, Emily acted shocked and hurt. She claimed she would never do something like that and suggested maybe Daniel was trying to stir up drama. Her calmness made me question myself again, but deep down, I knew she was lying. The pattern was too clear. She was isolating me, one friend at a time, by planting seeds of doubt and mistrust. The more I tried to defend myself, the worse it got. Sarah stopped answering my calls. Daniel grew distant, and even casual acquaintances seemed colder when I saw them. It was as if Emily had poisoned the air around me, whispering lies that I couldn't fight against. I felt trapped, watching my friendships crumble while Emily smiled sweetly and pretended to be supportive. I started noticing how she would drop subtle comments in front of others, little digs disguised as jokes. She'd say things like, "Oh, she forgets things all the time," or "She can be a little dramatic, but don't take it personally." People laughed, but I could see the way they looked at me afterward, like they were starting to believe her version of me instead of the truth. The worst moment came when Sarah finally confronted me in person. She told me she couldn't trust me anymore, that too many things didn't add up. I tried to explain, tried to tell her it was Emily twisting everything, but Sarah shook her head. She said she didn't want to be caught in the middle of whatever was going on in my life. Hearing those words broke something inside me. As Sarah walked away, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. A friendship I had cherished for years was gone, not because of anything I had done, but because Emily had carefully, deliberately destroyed it. That was the moment I realized the damage was real. Emily wasn't just invading my privacy, she was dismantling my life piece by piece, and now she had taken one of the people I trusted most. I went home that night with a heavy heart, knowing I had lost Sarah, and maybe Daniel too. The realization hit me hard. Emily's lies weren't just harmless games. They were weapons, and she was using them to cut me off from everyone I cared about. And for the first time, I understood just how dangerous she really was. At first, I thought Emily's sabotage was limited to my friendships, but soon I noticed strange things happening with my money. One morning, I checked my bank account and saw that my balance was lower than it should have been. I told myself maybe I had forgotten about a purchase, but the amount missing was too large to ignore. It wasn't just a few dollars, it was hundreds. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the transactions, trying to remember if I had spent that much. The first suspicious charge was for an online clothing store I had never used. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, but then I saw another charge for a delivery service I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I realized these weren't random errors. Someone had used my card. I quickly called the bank, but the representative told me the purchases had been made with my exact details, my name, my address, even my email. It was as if someone had been inside my life, pretending to be me. I tried to stay calm, but my mind immediately went to Emily. She was the only one who had access to my things. She had been in my room, gone through my desk, and even used my phone before. The thought made me sick. Had she taken my card numbers? Had she written down my information when I wasn't looking? The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. She had been planting herself deeper into my life, and now she was reaching into my finances. That evening, I checked my wallet carefully. My debit card was still there, but something felt off. It was slightly out of place, as if someone had taken it out and put it back in a hurry. I remembered a night when Emily had offered to grab takeout for both of us. She had insisted on paying, but maybe that was when she had taken my card details. The realization made my stomach twist. She wasn't just curious anymore, she was stealing from me. The next day, I received a call from my credit card company. They wanted to confirm a large purchase for electronics that had been made in my name. I froze. I hadn't bought anything. The representative explained that the order had been placed online and was scheduled to be delivered to my apartment. My apartment. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. Emily wasn't just stealing money. She was bold enough to have things delivered right under my nose. When I confronted her casually about packages, she smiled and said she had ordered a few things for herself. She claimed she had used her own card, but I knew she was lying. The timing was too perfect. I wanted to scream at her, but I held back. If I accused her without proof, she would twist it around and make me look paranoid again. I needed evidence, something undeniable that would show she was behind it all. That night, I stayed up late, scrolling through my accounts. More charges appeared, subscriptions I had never signed up for, food deliveries I hadn't ordered, and even a hotel booking in my name. My chest tightened with every line I read. Emily was draining me slowly, piece by piece, and if I didn't stop her, I would lose everything. I felt trapped in my own home, living with someone who was destroying me from the inside. I thought about going to the police, but I knew they would ask for proof. Right now, all I had were suspicions and a gut feeling. Emily was smart. She covered her tracks well, always smiling, always pretending to be innocent. If I wanted to stop her, I had to be smarter. I had to catch her in the act, to show the world what she was really doing. The next morning, I decided to take action. I called the bank again, reported the fraudulent charges, and asked for detailed records. I also set up alerts on my phone so I would know the moment any new charges appeared. As I hung up, I felt a mix of fear and determination. Emily thought she could control me, but I wasn't going to let her win. By the end of the day, I had made up my mind. I wasn't just going to sit back and watch her ruin me. I was going to investigate, to dig into every detail until I had the proof I needed. Emily had crossed a line, and now I was ready to fight back. The financial trap she had set for me was real, but I wasn't going to let it close without a battle. The days after I discovered the fraudulent charges were some of the most stressful of my life. I tried to act normal around Emily, but inside I was constantly on edge. I started double-checking everything, my phone, my wallet, even the locks on my doors. But Emily seemed to notice my unease, and instead of backing off, she leaned into it. She began making comments that made me question myself, little remarks that seemed harmless at first, but slowly chipped away at my confidence. It started with small things. I would leave my keys on the kitchen counter, only to find them later in my bedroom. When I asked Emily if she had moved them, she would laugh and say, "You're so forgetful sometimes." Another time, I was sure I had left my phone charging in the living room, but I found it tucked under a pillow on the couch. When I asked her about it, she shrugged and said, "Maybe you're just tired. You've been working too much." Her words were gentle, but they made me doubt myself. Soon it wasn't just objects. I would remember conversations one way, but Emily would insist they had happened differently. If I said she had promised to pay her share of the bills, she would smile and say, "No, you must have misunderstood. I told you I'd pay next week." If I mentioned something she had said the night before, she would shake her head and claim she never said it at all. Each time, she was calm, patient, and convincing, while I was left feeling confused and uncertain. The more it happened, the more I began to wonder if I was losing my grip. I started writing things down, where I left my belongings, what Emily had promised, even small conversations, just so I could be sure I wasn't imagining things. But even then, Emily found ways to twist it. Once, when I showed her a note I had written about her agreeing to pay for groceries, she laughed and said, "You're really going to write things down now? That's not healthy. You should trust me." Her words stung, making me feel foolish for even trying to protect myself. Emily also began to use my friends against me, even the few I had left. She would casually mention that they had said things about me, things that made me feel insecure. "Sarah told me she thinks you're too sensitive," she'd say, or "Daniel said you can be a little dramatic." When I asked my friends about it, they denied ever saying those things, but the seed of doubt was already planted. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Emily was right. Maybe I was overreacting. At night, I would lie awake replaying everything in my head. Was I really forgetting where I put my things? Was I misremembering conversations? Was I being too sensitive? The questions circled endlessly, and the more I thought about them, the more I felt like I was losing control of my own mind. Emily's calm, steady voice echoed in my head, always making me feel like I was the problem. One evening, I came home to find the thermostat set to a temperature I never used. When I asked Emily about it, she smiled and said, You must have changed it before you left. I knew I hadn't touched it, but the way she said it made me hesitate. Maybe I had? Maybe I was just too distracted to remember. That hesitation was exactly what she wanted, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes when I dropped the subject. The more I tried to stand up for myself, the more Emily turned it around. If I accused her of moving my things, she would act hurt and say, "Why would I ever do that to you? You know I care about you." If I pointed out her lies, she would insist I was imagining things. Her calmness made me feel unstable, like I was the one creating problems out of nothing. It was a slow, steady erosion of my confidence, and I could feel myself slipping further into her control. But then, one night, as I sat in my room staring at my notes, something clicked. I realized that every time I doubted myself, Emily was there, feeding that doubt. Every time I felt confused, she was the one who had planted the seed. It wasn't random, and it wasn't me losing my mind. It was deliberate. She wanted me to question myself, to feel weak, to rely on her version of reality instead of my own. That realization hit me like a wave. Emily wasn't just lying or stealing, she was gaslighting me, twisting my perception of reality to make me doubt myself. And the scariest part was how effective it had been. For weeks, I had been questioning my own memory, my own sanity, when all along it was her plan. That night, I promised myself I would stop letting her control my mind. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Emily was deliberately trying to make me doubt myself, and I couldn't let her win. The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest I had ever experienced. Emily's presence in the apartment felt heavier every day, like a shadow that stretched into every corner of my life. She still smiled, still acted sweet in front of others, but I could feel the sharpness beneath her words. It was as if she was weaving a web around me, and the more I struggled, the tighter it became. I tried to hold on to the few friendships I had left, but even those began to slip through my fingers. It started with unanswered messages. Friends who used to reply within minutes now took hours, sometimes days, to respond. When I finally got them on the phone, their voices were distant, cautious, as if they didn't know what to believe anymore. I could sense the hesitation, the doubt that Emily had planted in their minds. Every conversation felt like I was defending myself against accusations I couldn't see, fighting rumors I couldn't prove were false. At work, things weren't much better. My coworkers, once friendly and supportive, began to treat me differently. They whispered when I walked past, exchanged glances I couldn't interpret, and avoided sitting next to me in meetings. I overheard one of them say, "I thought she was more reliable than that," and my stomach dropped. I didn't know what Emily had told them, or how far her lies had spread, but I knew she was behind it. She had a way of making her stories sound believable, even when they weren't. The isolation grew worse at home. Emily would casually mention things my friends had supposedly said about me, planting seeds of doubt that made me question everyone around me. "Sarah thinks you're too controlling," she'd say with a sympathetic smile, or, "Daniel told me he doesn't trust you anymore." Whether those words were true or not didn't matter. Once they were spoken, they lingered in my mind, gnawing at me until I couldn't shake them. I tried to reach out, to explain to my friends what was happening, but the more I insisted, the more defensive I sounded. "You don't understand," I told them. "She's lying, she's twisting everything." But instead of sympathy, I saw pity in their eyes, as if they thought I was paranoid or unstable. Emily had done her job well. She had made me look like the problem, while she played the role of the caring, innocent roommate. Nights became the hardest. I would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every interaction, wondering who I could still trust. The silence of the apartment was suffocating, broken only by the sound of Emily moving around in the next room. Sometimes I thought I heard her whispering on the phone late at night, her voice low and secretive. I imagined her spreading more lies, reaching more people, tightening the circle around me. I began to withdraw, not because I wanted to, but because I felt I had no choice. Every time I tried to defend myself, it only seemed to make things worse. Friends stopped inviting me out, coworkers stopped including me in conversations, and even family members grew distant. I felt like I was disappearing piece by piece, erased by Emily's careful manipulation. The apartment, once my safe space, now felt like a prison. I avoided the living room when Emily was there, ate meals alone in my room, and kept my door locked whenever possible. But even behind a locked door, I couldn't escape the feeling that she was winning. She had taken my trust, my friendships, and now she was taking my sense of belonging. One afternoon, I scrolled through my social media and noticed something that made my chest tighten. People I had known for years had unfollowed me. Old friends who used to like every post were gone, their silence louder than any words. I clicked through my contacts, realizing how many connections had faded in just a few weeks. It wasn't just bad luck. It was Emily's work, spreading her poison until I was left standing alone. That was the moment it truly sank in. I wasn't just imagining things. Emily had succeeded in isolating me, cutting me off from the people I loved and turning them against me. As I sat there staring at the empty screen, I realized how many people had already slipped away, and how much power she had taken from me without ever raising her voice. The damage was real, and I was more alone than I had ever been. The tension in the apartment had grown unbearable. Every day felt like walking on glass, careful not to make a sound that might give Emily another reason to twist reality against me. I tried to keep my distance, but no matter how much space I created, she always found a way to insert herself into my life. Her presence was suffocating, her smile a mask that hid something darker. I could feel myself unraveling, and I knew I couldn't keep living like this. It wasn't just the lies or the stolen money anymore. It was the constant pressure of her manipulation. She had turned my friends against me, made me doubt my own memory, and left me isolated in my own home. I felt like a stranger in my own life, watching everything I had built crumble piece by piece. The weight of it pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. Something inside me snapped, and I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer. One evening, I came home to find Emily sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea as if nothing was wrong. The sight of her calmness made my blood boil. I wanted to scream, to throw everything on the floor and demand answers, but I forced myself to stay composed. I sat across from her, my hands trembling under the table, and studied her face. She looked up at me with that same sweet smile, the one that had fooled everyone else, but this time I wasn't fooled. I started with small questions, testing her. "Did you move my keys again?" I asked. She tilted her head and laughed softly, saying I must have misplaced them. "Did you use my card for those charges?" I pressed. She shook her head, her voice calm and steady, insisting she would never do something like that. Each denial was smooth, practiced, as if she had rehearsed them 100 times. But I could see the flicker in her eyes, the tiny crack in her mask. The more she denied, the angrier I became. My voice grew sharper, my words more direct. I told her I knew what she was doing, that I wasn't crazy, that I had proof of her lies. She leaned back in her chair, her smile fading just slightly, and for the first time I saw something else in her expression, something cold and calculating. It was the look of someone who knew they had been caught but wasn't ready to admit it. Emily tried to turn it back on me, as she always did. She said I was stressed, that I was imagining things, that maybe I needed help. Her words were soft, almost caring, but I could hear the poison underneath. She wanted me to doubt myself again, to fall back into the trap she had built. But this time I didn't waver. I held her gaze, refusing to let her twist the truth. The silence between us grew heavy. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the pounding of my own heart. Emily's smile was gone now, replaced by a blank expression that made my skin crawl. She knew I wasn't backing down, and I knew she was running out of excuses. For the first time, the power between us shifted, and I felt a spark of strength I hadn't felt in weeks. I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'm done playing games," I said. "I know what you've been doing. I know you've been lying, stealing, and trying to make me doubt myself. I'm not crazy, and I'm not imagining it. You've been trying to destroy me, and I want to know why." Emily's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might finally admit it. Her lips parted as if she was about to speak, but then she closed them again, her jaw tightening. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, until I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the apartment. My voice shook with anger and desperation as I finally demanded the truth. "Enough lies, Emily. Tell me the truth. Why are you doing this to me?" The confrontation at the kitchen table left the air between us heavy and sharp. Emily didn't admit anything, but her silence spoke louder than words. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her obsession with me than simple malice. She wasn't just trying to ruin my life for fun. There was a purpose behind it, something personal. That thought haunted me, and I knew I had to dig deeper if I wanted to understand why she was doing this. I started by going through the few things I knew about her. She had told me she grew up in one town, then later mentioned another. She had claimed to have gone to a certain school, but when I searched online, I couldn't find her name anywhere. Every detail she had given me seemed to crumble under the slightest bit of scrutiny. It was as if her entire identity was a carefully constructed mask, and I was only now beginning to see the cracks. One night, while Emily was out, I searched her room. My hands shook as I opened her drawers, terrified she might walk in at any moment. Most of what I found was ordinary: clothes, books, toiletries, but tucked inside a folder at the back of her desk was a stack of old photographs. My breath caught as I flipped through them. Some were of her as a child, but others made my blood run cold. They were pictures of my family. I stared at the images in disbelief. There was my mother smiling at a picnic I barely remembered. There was my father standing outside the house I grew up in. And then, in one photo, there was me, no older than 10 years old, holding a balloon at a birthday party. The photo had been taken from a distance, like someone watching from the outside. My hands trembled as I realized Emily had been keeping these for years. The discovery left me shaken. Why would she have these pictures? How did she even get them? I searched the folder again and found something even more disturbing: a letter. It was old, the paper yellowed and creased, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was my mother's. The letter spoke of a family friend who had been betrayed, someone whose life had been torn apart by a decision my parents had made long ago. As I read the words, pieces began to fall into place. Emily wasn't just some random roommate who happened to move in with me. She had a connection to my family, one that went back years. The letter mentioned a child who had been caught in the middle of the fallout, someone who had grown up carrying the weight of that betrayal. My chest tightened as I realized what it meant. Emily was that child. When Emily returned home later that night, I couldn't look at her the same way. Every smile, every word, every action now carried a different weight. She hadn't chosen me by chance. She had sought me out, moved into my life with a plan, and every step she had taken since then had been part of her revenge. I sat in my room, staring at the photographs spread out on my bed. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. What exactly had my parents done to her family? Why had she waited until now to strike? And most importantly, how far was she willing to go to make me pay for something I hadn't even known about? The truth was undeniable now. Emily wasn't just a manipulative stranger. She was tied to my past, to my family, to secrets I had never been told. The betrayal wasn't random. It was personal. And as much as I wanted to deny it, I knew I had to face the reality. Emily's war against me had started long before she ever stepped foot in my apartment. That night, As I lay awake, the final realization sank in. Emily's obsession with me wasn't about who I was. It was about where I came from. She was connected to my family, bound to me by a history I hadn't even known existed. And now I was caught in the middle of a story that had begun years before I was old enough to understand betrayal. The photographs and the letter I had found in Emily's room haunted me for days. I couldn't stop staring at my mother's handwriting, the words describing a betrayal I had never heard about. My parents had always seemed honest, almost painfully so, but this letter told a different story. It spoke of a broken promise, of a family left behind, and of consequences that had rippled far beyond what I had ever imagined. For the first time, I realized my parents had secrets, and Emily was somehow tied to them. I tried to piece together the fragments. The letter mentioned a business deal gone wrong, one that had left another family ruined financially. My parents had apparently chosen to protect themselves, even if it meant destroying someone else's future. The child caught in the middle of that fallout had grown up in bitterness and anger. As I read those words again and again, I couldn't help but think of Emily. She wasn't just a stranger who had stumbled into my life. She was the child my parents had wronged. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Her obsession with my personal life, her need to control me, her determination to isolate me, it wasn't random cruelty. It was targeted. She wanted me to feel the same helplessness her family had felt, the same betrayal, the same loss. I was paying for sins I hadn't committed, but in her eyes, I was the perfect stand-in for the people who had. I confronted my parents over the phone, my voice shaking as I read parts of the letter aloud. At first, they were silent, and then my mother began to cry. She admitted that years ago they had made a choice to protect themselves during a financial crisis, a choice that had left another family devastated. She said they had tried to move on to forget, but she never imagined the child from that family would come back into our lives. Her words confirmed what I already knew. Emily's connection to me was no accident. Hearing the truth from my mother made my stomach twist. I wanted to be angry at my parents, but mostly I felt trapped. I was caught in the middle of a war that had started long before I was old enough to understand. Emily wasn't just lashing out. She was carrying the weight of years of resentment, and I had become her target because I was the closest thing to justice she could reach. That night, I sat alone in my room, the letter spread out on my bed. I thought about everything Emily had done, invading my privacy, stealing my money, turning my friends against me, and suddenly it all had a chilling clarity. She wasn't doing it for fun. She was doing it because she believed I deserved it, because in her mind I was part of the family that had destroyed hers. The realization hit me hard. Every lie, every manipulation, every cruel act was part of a plan that had been years in the making. Emily hadn't chosen me by chance. She had sought me out, moved into my life with purpose, and every step she had taken since then had been fueled by revenge. I thought back to the way she had smiled when she first moved in, how perfect she had seemed, how quickly she had wormed her way into my trust. It hadn't been kindness. It had been strategy. She had been playing a role, waiting for the right moment to strike, and I had walked straight into her trap without even realizing it. The weight of it all pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. I wasn't just dealing with a manipulative roommate anymore. I was dealing with someone who had built her entire life around making me pay for something I hadn't done. And as much as I wanted to deny it, I finally understood the truth. Emily's motive was revenge, and she wasn't going to stop until she felt I had suffered enough. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, I realized the battle between us had only just begun. She had her reasons, twisted as they were, and now I knew exactly what I was up against. This wasn't just about lies or money anymore. It was about a family secret that had bound us together in the worst possible way. And Emily was determined to make me carry the weight of it. The days after learning Emily's true connection to my family were filled with dread. Every time I looked at her, I saw not just a manipulative roommate, but someone who had been planning this for years. She moved around the apartment with a calmness that unsettled me, as if she knew she was in control. I tried to keep my distance, but no matter how careful I was, she always seemed one step ahead. It was like she could predict my every move, and that realization made me feel trapped in my own home. It wasn't long before her attacks escalated. One morning, I woke up to find my work laptop missing. I searched everywhere, tearing through drawers and closets, but it was gone. Hours later, my boss called me, furious about an email that had been sent from my account. The email contained confidential files, leaked to a competitor. I knew instantly that Emily had taken my laptop and framed me. My heart pounded as I tried to explain, but my boss's voice was cold. He told me I was suspended until further notice. The humiliation was unbearable. My career, something I had worked so hard to build, was suddenly hanging by a thread. I sat in my room, shaking, realizing how far Emily was willing to go. She wasn't just trying to isolate me anymore. She was trying to destroy my future. And the worst part was that she was succeeding. Every lie she told, every trap she set, was pulling me deeper into a hole I couldn't climb out of. Later that week, things took an even darker turn. I came home to find 2 police officers waiting at the door. They asked for me by name, their expressions serious. My stomach dropped as they explained that I was under investigation for credit card fraud and identity theft. Someone had been using my information to make illegal purchases, and all the evidence pointed directly to me. I knew immediately who was behind it, but how could I prove it? Emily had been careful, leaving just enough of a trail to make me look guilty. As the officers questioned me, Emily stood in the background, her face a mask of concern. She even placed a hand on my shoulder, pretending to comfort me, while I could see the satisfaction flicker in her eyes. It was the cruelest performance yet, and it made me want to scream. But I stayed quiet, answering the officer's questions as calmly as I could, even though my insides were twisting with fear. When they finally left, warning me that charges could be filed soon, I collapsed onto the couch. My hands shook as I buried my face in them, the weight of everything crashing down. Emily had taken my friends, my reputation, my job, and now she was trying to take my freedom. I felt cornered, like a mouse trapped by a cat that enjoyed watching me squirm. For the first time, I wondered if I would ever escape her grip, but as the fear settled, something else began to rise inside me: anger. I thought about all the times I had stayed silent, all the times I had doubted myself, all the times I had let her twist the truth. I realized that if I didn't fight back now, I would lose everything. Emily had been playing her game for years, but I was done being her pawn. I started to think about the evidence I already had: the photographs, the letter, the strange charges on my accounts. Maybe it wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. If I could gather more proof, if I could catch her in the act, I could finally turn the tables. I couldn't undo the damage she had already done, but I could stop her from destroying me completely. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the mess of papers and notes I had collected. My fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. Instead, it fueled me. I knew the road ahead would be dangerous, that Emily would fight harder the closer I got to exposing her. But I also knew I couldn't back down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. As I locked my door and prepared for bed, I whispered to myself the promise I had been too afraid to make before. I wasn't going to let her win. She had tightened the trap around me, but I was going to break free, and when I did, I would make sure everyone saw the truth. Emily wanted revenge, but I was ready to fight back. The weight of everything Emily had done pressed down on me like a storm cloud, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of determination. I was tired of being her victim, tired of doubting myself, tired of watching her dismantle my life piece by piece. If she had spent years planning her revenge, then I would spend every ounce of strength I had fighting back. I knew I couldn't undo the damage she had already caused, but I could stop her from destroying me completely. I began by organizing everything I had collected so far. The photographs, the letter from my mother, the suspicious bank statements, and the records of fraudulent charges, all of it went into a folder. I made copies, both physical and digital, determined not to let Emily erase the evidence if she discovered what I was doing. For the first time, I felt like I had a weapon of my own, something solid I could use to prove the truth. But I knew it wasn't enough. Emily was clever, and she had already convinced so many people that I was unstable. If I wanted to expose her, I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't twist or explain away. That's when I decided to set traps of my own. I installed a small camera in my room, hidden among my books, and another near the desk where she had rifled through my things before. If she tried to invade my privacy again, I would catch her in the act. The first few days were nerve-wracking. I went about my routine as if nothing had changed, pretending to be distracted, pretending to be weak. Emily seemed to relax, her confidence returning as she moved around the apartment with her usual calmness. But I watched her closely, waiting for the moment she would slip. And sure enough, one evening when she thought I was asleep, she crept into my room. The camera caught everything. Emily opened my drawers, flipped through my papers, and even scrolled through my phone when she thought I wasn't looking. My heart pounded as I watched the footage later, relief and anger mixing inside me. Finally, I had proof, clear, undeniable proof that she was invading my life. It wasn't just my word against hers anymore. Encouraged, I dug deeper. I checked my bank alerts and traced the fraudulent charges back to accounts linked to her email. I saved screenshots, printed receipts, and documented every detail. Each discovery felt like a small victory, a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Emily had been careful, but not careful enough. Her arrogance had left cracks in her plan, and I was determined to pry them open. The more evidence I gathered, the stronger I felt. For weeks, she had made me feel powerless, but now the balance was shifting. I wasn't just reacting to her games anymore, I was building a case against her. Every lie she told, every manipulation she tried, only added to the pile of proof I was collecting. For the first time, I could see a way out of the nightmare she had created. Still, I kept my guard up. Emily was dangerous, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. I acted normal around her, smiling when she spoke, nodding when she lied, all the while hiding the evidence I had collected. It was a dangerous game, but I had no choice. If she suspected what I was doing, she might escalate even further. Late one night, as I sat at my desk surrounded by papers, screenshots, and video files, I realized I finally had enough. The folder in front of me was thick with proof. Proof of her lies, her theft, her manipulation, and her connection to my family. My hands trembled as I closed it, not from fear this time, but from the weight of victory. For the first time since Emily had entered my life, I felt a surge of hope. She had spent months tightening her trap around me, but now I had the key to break free. I had gathered enough evidence to expose her, to show the world who she really was. And as I looked at the folder, I knew the next move was mine. The folder of evidence sat heavy in my lap, thicker than I ever imagined it would be. Every page, every screenshot, every recording was a piece of the puzzle that revealed Emily for who she truly was. I had spent weeks gathering it, nights without sleep, days filled with fear, and now it was all here in front of me. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that she had been lying, stealing, and manipulating. Proof that she had come into my life with one purpose: revenge. But as I stared at the folder, another weight pressed down on me. The letter from my mother. The words she had written years ago, confessing the betrayal that had destroyed Emily's family, echoed in my mind. My parents had made choices that hurt people, choices they had buried and never spoken of again. And now, because of those choices, I was the one paying the price. The evidence didn't just expose Emily, it exposed my family too. I imagined what would happen if I took the folder to the police. Emily would be unmasked, her lies revealed, her crimes undeniable. But along with her downfall would come the truth about my parents. Their reputation, their carefully built lives, would be shattered. People would see them not as the kind, honest figures I had always believed them to be, but as the ones who had started this chain of destruction. The thought tore me apart. I wanted justice for myself, for everything Emily had done to me. I wanted the world to see her for the monster she was. But I also wanted to protect my family, even if they had made mistakes. They were still my parents, and despite everything, I loved them. Could I really be the one to drag their secrets into the light, knowing it would destroy them? Emily's voice echoed in my head, the way she had smiled when she told me I didn't know who she really was. She had been right. I hadn't known. But now I did. I knew her pain, her anger, her motive, and as twisted as her actions were, I couldn't deny that they came from a place of deep hurt. She had lost everything because of my family, and in her mind, I was the one who had to pay. I sat in silence for hours, the folder in front of me, my heart torn in two directions. On one side was justice for myself, the chance to finally be free of Emily's grip. On the other was loyalty to my family, the chance to protect their name, even if it meant carrying the burden of their sins. It was a choice with no easy answer, a choice that would define the rest of my life. Finally, as the night stretched into morning, I stood and placed the folder on my desk. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window, tired but resolute. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let Emily win, but I also couldn't destroy my family. There had to be a way to end this without losing everything. I picked up the folder and held it tightly, feeling the weight of both the evidence and the decision it represented. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady as I whispered to myself, "This ends now." Whether I revealed everything or kept the family secret buried, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The choice was mine, and mine alone. To expose Emily and bring her down, or to protect my family's name and carry the truth in silence. Both paths were heavy, both filled with consequences I couldn't escape. But as I closed the folder and took a deep breath, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to Emily's games, I was deciding my own fate. And in that moment, I made my final decision. Whether to reveal everything or protect my family's name, I would live with the consequences. Emily had tried to destroy my life, but she would never take away my ability to choose. This was my story now, and I was ready to face whatever came next.